I actually learned that recently. Like when I trained for my first Ironman, I spent the first several months trying to do it on my own. And then as the race got closer, I was like, I need to hire a coach.
Yeah.
And then I just did what the coach said. And my training took on a whole other level.
Why did you decide to do the Ironman?
Because you got to do hard shit in life, Logan.
I agreed. What was really the catalyst or the tipping point or the thing that sort of pushed you over that was like, I'm sure you had thoughts about it and moments where there was resistance. And then
Hell yeah.
what was the thing that really pushed you that was like, I need to do this?
I think you know Jesse Itzler? Have you seen him on social?
Mm-mm.
Anyways, he's a guy on social, super successful, yada, yada. And he talks about like one big event each year that like you can remember. And of course, like when there's something out there that resonates with me and I think about it more than once in the sense of like, I would like to do that, I have to listen to it. Otherwise, you know, I know that I'll think about it in the future and be like, man, why didn't I try that while I could?
Yeah.
And that thought of the Ironman like kept popping up for me. And so I think going into 2023, I was like, this is the year. I'm going to do that on my birthday. I'm going to do an Ironman on my birthday. And I am not an endurance athlete. Like, I love sprinting. I love lifting weights. I love power sports. In middle school, you asked me to run a mile, and it was like the bane of my existence.
I hated it,
and I
too.
still hate it. But when you're training for an endurance block or an event, typically every Saturday or Sunday, your longest session is planned for the week. And each week leading up to the event, it gets slightly longer. And if you're signing up for bigger and bigger events, that means every Saturday you're running, swimming, biking longer than you ever have before in your life. And so whether it was for my Ironman or this year I did an ultra marathon, every Saturday I was doing a distance that I'd never done before in my life. And I would wake up with so much anxiety because it's like, I know that this is going to hurt. And I know that my mind is going to be in pain and really not want to do it. And however, what do you think was the highlight of my week every single week?
That Saturday when you were
Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, Saturday afternoon.
Saturday afternoon when I got back and I had overcome myself. When I got back from those long training sessions and overcame my own mind and my own resistance, dude, I bet those
endorphins carried into the next week.
The endorphins were like top notch, but also like the satisfaction of being like, man, I just overcame myself and I'm so proud of myself.
I imagine that changed your discipline in like so many other aspects of your life too. Just going through that.
Everywhere. So, yeah, I don't remember the question. Why did I do an Ironman? And now I'm addicted to that feeling.
Yeah.
That shit is hard.
You gonna do another one?
I actually have, I know that I have to do a 100-miler. That there's the Leadville 100. It's a thing that I've seen, and I'm like, that would be pretty badass to do. And once I have that thought, I'm like, fuck, I have to do it. Even though if I tried to do that right now, 100% could not. So, but yeah, I will do those at some point.
We've talked lately, and we wanted to talk about it in this podcast. I know of doing things before you're ready to do them.
Yeah.
So the Ironman, obviously, before you were ready to do it,
100%.
You decided to do it.
Yeah.
What were those first few training sessions like? What was the mental game like in the first few weeks, let's say? Because I know those, for me, that's always the toughest. When I just decide to do something that I'm not prepared for, there's so much resistance. There's so many moments that your mind wants to stop you, or that wants you to take a more casual approach or an easy route, or somehow pull you out of it, but logically giving you a reason to do it, like saying it's okay to pull out or something like that. So what were those first few weeks like?
I mean, look, that's like a grand event. Like, I can take a picture at the end. It's an Ironman. It's a big statement. But like, don't you experience resistance every day?
Yeah.
I have
All the time.
something that I
All the
have to
time.
do every day that I don't want to do.
Yeah.
And it's the same. It's literally the same exact thing, right? And so I don't know if you've ever read the book, The War of Art.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all that book is about, is every day you get up and you know that there are things that you have to do that are good for your growth, that are good for your spirit, that are good for your profession, for who you want to become. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to do it, but you do want to do it.
I know.
And so that's true. The hill we have to climb every single day.
Yeah.
I was listening to the David Goggins podcast, not the Andrew Huberman podcast where David Goggins was on it. And Huberman was talking about they just discovered a part of the brain, which I won't pretend to remember the name, but they were calling it the seat of the will. Mm. And the key to growing that part of your mind was doing something you genuinely don't want to do. And after doing the event that you genuinely didn't want to do, they saw that part of the brain grew. Mm. And when you didn't do things that you don't want to do, it atrophied. And so they found, in athletes that part of the brain tends to be bigger. Mm. And it made me think about, and so they were relating that to essentially the willpower muscle or the willpower part of the brain. And so whether it's an ice bath for 3 minutes, maybe it's an ice bath for 1 minute. If you don't want to do that ice bath for 1 minute, that part of your brain is going to grow. But if you start to enjoy it, you won't get the same benefit from that 1 minute ice bath.
Right.
From the mental willpower.
Right.
Physiologically, you will.
Well, it's such like a testament to human adaptation and growth and atrophy. So we've talked about this too, you're either growing or dying. Mm. And if that part of the brain needs you to do, if that willpower part of the brain needs you to do something in order to grow, do something that you actually don't want to do, and you do it over and over and over again, then just like a muscle, at some point, it's going to say, okay, this isn't feeding me the same way. So in that moment of adaptation, if you don't decide to grow more after that, that's why growth is always, you need to be doing something more and something better, and why there needs to be progression. Because if you're not doing something, if you reach that level where you've adapted and everything is good, and it's almost like finding that comfort zone again, well, then it's almost like you're atrophying because you're not growing. Mm-hmm. So then you got to find something new once again that's going to push you to grow and to progress.
100%.
Yeah.
I was thinking about the word growth, and it's easy to think that growth, the word kind of implies getting bigger and bigger, but it can also mean adapting and evolving. It can mean changing. It can mean letting go, right? Yeah. Like there are cycles in a growth cycle, and sometimes growth could be going inwards, right? And recognizing that I'm afraid of something and addressing that, verbalizing that could be growth. And that's not adding on anything. That's releasing something.
Right.
So to go back to your question, like in terms of the Ironman or just doing things that I don't want to do in general, I think it comes down to just chipping away at stuff one step at a time. Like that's the only way to get through a massive race like that.
Yeah.
It's
Did you have to think about it in chunks, like, okay, I have this mile or these 3 miles, or how did you kind of look at
the chunk was literally one moment at a time.
Yeah.
It's you hear a lot of endurance athletes talk about how meditative it is because that's the only way to get through when you're in a thing for like 8, 9, 10 hours. And so
God, talk about learning to not think about the end result.
You can't. It's crazy. It's overwhelming. It's like I remember when I was running a 50K, I got to the halfway mark, and I had a brief moment of celebration where I was like, I'm halfway through. And then immediately after, I was like, fuck, I'm only halfway through. That and the next few miles after that were the hardest part of the race.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking about how much was left.
Yeah.
And the only way to get through that after that was just like, okay. And I was literally saying it out loud. I had to say it out loud to get through it. Was just one step, one step, one step, one step. And that goes for everything, right? Like I ran 2 miles this morning and I was just not in the mood. And I was just like, one step, one step, one step, one step.
I'll psych myself out on the treadmill and be like, just get on it for 20 minutes. Do a 20-minute class. Totally. And then right when I'm done, I'm like, all right, I got enough in me to do another 20-minute class.
Yeah. I think you get, if you're constantly growing, I think you get more confident in your ability to do things that you don't know how to do.
Right.
But that doesn't make it any easier.
No.
I'll relate it to my job.
Because you're never doing the same level of things if you're growing.
Exactly.
So you're always going to need to, muster up that courage and energy and motivation or whatever you need to do to go to the next thing. It's sort of like, what did Einstein say? You can't solve a problem with the same level of consciousness to get the solution. So if you kind of take that and apply it, well, if your consciousness is working at a level to solve these problems and to get through this process, well, now all of a sudden your consciousness is expanded. So the next level of problems that you're working on are going to require a higher level of consciousness. So you're never going to get past that feeling of resistance to get those things done because it's inevitable. You're growing,
The way that you just said it. So in order to solve the next higher order problem, your consciousness is at a certain state. And in order to be able to know how to do that next thing to solve that higher level problem, your consciousness has to expand.
Yeah.
But how do you go from this level consciousness to this level consciousness? And to me, I'm thinking of a pinball machine. You just start trying stuff and one of them works and you say, oh, that's how I do it. And then you can begin to think about, well, why did that one work? And then you try to do it again and it worked again. You say, now I know how to do this next level thing. And you're aware of how to do that repeatedly, and now your consciousness has expanded.
Well, and that's where mastery of the mind comes in, because it's what routes do I need to take to expand my mind? And I think you can definitely get there ways that you're talking about, like trying different things, and that's the only way. It's like if you never try 15 different ways to, say, train for a marathon or train for an Ironman, before you go get a coach who's like, hey, do it this way, you're never going to figure out the best route to do it. Like if you're just like, oh, I'm going to go run 10 miles every day, but then never decide to do, say, a progression run over the course of 4 weeks, you're not going to figure out which way is the best way. Your mind can't think about those different expansive ways of trying something. So I think that's where the curiosity comes in, I think, with people. Why curiosity is so important, because if you're curious, then you're going to think about 18, 20, 25 different ways to try to accomplish something, instead of just being stubborn and thinking like, oh, I'm going to keep doing it this way and this is the way it has to work.
I think people also get overwhelmed by the number of ways, which is why for me it comes back to one at a time. And like we talked about with this podcast, having the humility to suck at a thing in order to eventually get good at it. And I think that has prevented me from getting really good at things I wanted to get good at sooner, because in my mind I could visualize the end result, what it was like to be in that dream state, the ideal state. But where I am in reality is far from that. And once I admit to myself that I want to have that, or I want to be that, then that gap becomes very real. And once I embark on that journey, I see how imperfect I am compared to what I'm imagining in my mind. And unless I'm willing to take each step, each wrong step, each learning step to eventually become that version, I'll never, ever get there.
Right.
And I'm so massively, daily obsessed with not bringing my goals down to the level of my actions. That I am every day striving to bring my actions to the level of my aspirations. That it's my mode of being. Yet I have people that I love in my life that can't seem to overcome themselves because of what we're talking about. The fear of falling short of their own expectations, I guess.
I think it's either that or the fear of exposing yourself to others that, yeah, you're going to suck at it.
Yeah.
I remember way back, one of my buddies, when we were just kind of first getting into golf, he had like bought new clubs and he went out there and was golfing and was just like terrible. And he's just like, I just don't want to do this anymore. Like, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, dude, like it's golf, one of the like hardest sports you can possibly
Super
play.
hard, yeah.
So hard, the hand-eye coordination that comes with that. And B, I was looking at him like, what's really the big deal here? Because you know you haven't played a lot. You know you haven't practiced a lot. Is it because you're going to have to go out there and people on the course are going to see that you're shanking balls left and right and you're going to suck? So I think the gap between where you are and what you want to become, or your expectations of what you want to become, is how quickly you cannot give a shit about what other people are thinking and almost be willing to laugh at yourself of how much you're going to suck.
Totally.
I still do it in the studio. I mean, we're on episode 3. How many times have I've tweaked the podcast setup all 3 times.
Totally.
And every time I look back at it, I'm like, oh, that sucked. That sucked.
Yeah.
Needs to get better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think it ever goes away, right?
No.
I'm thinking about professional athletes at the end of their career, right? Like especially if you're a superstar.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have some that go on to have incredible second careers and those that struggle to find themselves. And I think the difference there is, again, committing yourself to then learning a new craft. Like I wish we got to see Kobe play out the second half. Like he was
he won an
reinventing
Oscar.
himself. He won an Oscar. He was embarking on like this creative journey. And I know he was clearly committed to applying the rigors of learning a craft the same way he did in basketball to that second half.
Yeah.
And like it was going to be baller. He was going to be amazing.
It was going to be incredible.
Because he knew how to learn. He knew how to get good at a craft and the journey that requires.
I think there's a fear in that too. I can admit that I probably had fear of that. The fear of like learning something new. It's not just the fear of sucking at it. It's the fear of, I know in my experience, the fear of just wondering if I was going to be smart enough to figure out, say, these cameras when I switched into a creative career, or figuring out the editing programs at my age, feeling like, oh, I'm not going to understand technology as quickly. It's going to be tough. How long is it going to take me to figure this out? How far behind am I? I felt like behind all the time. It was like a complete mind game with me in the beginning of it, of just feeling like I wasn't smart enough to figure stuff out. I guess in a way that's humility, understanding like you're not going to be a fast learner maybe. You're not going to be the smartest at anything. You're not going to be the best right out of the gate. You're not going to be as good as probably somebody else or 15, 20 other people you're comparing yourself to. But just know that just like your Ironman, if you're just taking that one step at a time, just focus on that. Kobe said it all the time too, of like, trust the process. Focusing on those early steps. Would you say acknowledging that fear is probably the first step you have to take?
It's huge. I that's what I was thinking about. So I think that rather than pushing away the discomfort of that, and so let me just keep doing what I'm doing now, because that makes me super uncomfortable, right? Like admitting that I want a thing and then having to think about how to actually do that, and shit, that may take a long time, and I actually have no idea how to approach it, and I have to figure it out, and now I'm overwhelmed, and fuck, those emotions suck and they're hard. So
Yeah.
I'm just going to go and watch TV and wake up tomorrow and repeat my cycle. I have learned to view those fear, anxiety type emotions as signals. So I woke up today with anxiety about a certain professional commitment that I have. And so I wrote it down. I said, like, I am afraid of basically not achieving the target that I committed to this group of people. And I'm afraid of that. It makes me feel that I may not be good enough to pull off what I said we should pull off. And then I said, well, what should I do about it? And the only answer was work on it.
Yeah.
And so I just like opened up whatever the project was and I was like, okay, I'm just going to work on it now. And the anxiety went away because I immersed myself in the process. And there's no doubt that anxiety is going to come up again. But again, I have two choices. I can ignore it and be like, and I can justify that it wasn't going to work out anyways, or that was the wrong project, or that wasn't worth my time anyways, and like go do something more comfortable, or look at it square in the face and be like, interesting.
Yeah.
I'm having anxiety about this. I'm seeing it's because I feel like I'm not going to be good enough. But the way to be good enough at the thing is to work on it. So I'm going to work on it. And those, like, that is the daily battle we get to fight every single day. And
I mean, Casey did a video on anxiety that if we're able to really take a step back and look at it as what is it telling us? And not just identifying with, I have anxiety. It's like, okay, well, what's it telling you? Something's out of harmony. So if you can look at anxiety as what it's telling you and discover that like you did, and then look at resistance as you're actually on the right path, then it's understanding that, well, you're probably going to be in discomfort a lot with those two things.
Resistance is a signal that
Resistance
you want
is a signal
something.
that you want something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm having those same things come up with our product development right now. Like there's so many moments where I think about the end result. And I'm like, what the fuck is taking so long? Like this is making me, what if it goes till the end of the year and I don't have a product release yet? What if this? What if I spend all this money and we need to get these 3D renderings done and I need to get something out on Instagram and I need to get this thing marketing. And I'm like losing my mind, getting anxiety. And then I have to like reel myself back in. I'm like, no. I'm like, what part of the process are we in right now?
Yeah.
That's it.
And
truthfully, we're in a very deep research and development process right now. I can't think about what this product or what it could potentially do for me in the future, say financially. It's what is required of me right now to make this process as harmonious as possible. Whether that's harmony with my designer or the guys that we're trying to hire for the 3D renderings or my investor. Like, how do I make this as smooth as possible so just the energy that is being input by all parties feels really positive and good? And that's where I have to be super mindful of even my own energy.
What part of the process am I in right now? And it reminds me of the power of admitting powerlessness. And so if I'm having anxiety or fear about a whole range of things, by writing it down and looking at it, I then get to ask myself, do I have control over in this situation? And
which is such a great lesson in control.
I get to decipher through all the noise and say, okay, don't have control over this, don't have control over this, don't have control over this, but I do have control over this. Let me do this. And then I just immerse myself in that. And if I can just do that one emotion, one step, one feeling at a time, typically I end up in a much better place. Like the thing gets done.
I would imagine there was a time where probably you were a little bit more of a control freak, probably like I was, like trying to control everything or not recognizing.
I think you and I are probably different in that way.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, I think when I tried to control everything, I recognized, looking back at it, when I was able to finally let go of that control, you realize, at least in my case, how much energy was being wasted on that. If you are able to release that control over stuff that you have no control over and focus on that one thing, like you said, that you do have control over, the amount of energy and focus that can go to that one thing will actually help you accomplish it probably about 10 or 100 times faster. I recognize that in my case, like how much quicker I could get things done because I wasn't so concerned with all the things that I had no control over.
So I was on the opposite end of the
hear
spectrum
yours.
from you. I was on well, it's all out of my control anyways. Does it really matter at the end of the day? I'm going to die. Is anybody going to remember me? Just fuck it, let it be. And as I looked at that behavior and that mindset, I realized that was also anchored in fear of, it was a lack of courage of stepping into, okay, well, I do have another word for control, maybe autonomy over this aspect of it, right? But it's the same thing. How often? So I have a very ADD mind. I mean, that's part of why I went through a whole struggle with Adderall, right? I got prescribed Adderall 5 when I was a teenager, became dependent on it. Then I thought I couldn't get anything done without popping these pills, and then I started abusing them. So without that, I've had to come up with all of these practices to get out of my head, because I love ideas, I love envisioning, I love thinking about all of the dots, but harnessing that and then actually getting things done, my mind goes like that, and I'm just like, all of these fucking things, because when I'm working on a thing, it makes me think of another thing, and then I'm like, I don't want to lose that thing, so I need to write down that thing, and then before I know it, I'm working on another thing that wasn't the original task. So I literally have a notebook next to me at all times, and I write down, this is what I'm doing right now. And then I just one by one, I said, I have to be, it's my way of putting my consciousness out in front of me, so I can remind myself, like, this is what I'm doing right now. And I notice with a lot of very productive but busy people is there's a tendency to actually respond to all of the thoughts of the things that need to get done. And so you're just working on a never-ending to-do list versus truly synthesizing and thinking about, what is the highest impact thing I can get done right now? And so I try to be extremely conscious every day of knocking out a few high impact things. And then, of course, there is all of the little things that stack up that I have to get done. And I schedule time on my calendar, like, this is the knockout communications and to-do list time. But there's a time for that. And that's something that Heather and I in our working relationship have to work on a lot, because she is a very busy person. But if you ask her, like, what did she do and why did she do it? She'll be like, I don't know. I was just doing it. I was just doing it because it had to be done. And I'm like, yeah, but like, what was the intended impact of what you were doing? Like, what objective were you trying to achieve? And she falls into the trap of doing a bunch of stuff that's not tied to an objective.
Yeah.
And so,
which you could make the argument that's slipping into a bit more of her masculine side. Well,
I have what you might call a very masculine wife then. However, I have very strong feminine qualities and I have very strong masculine qualities. She has very strong masculine qualities and she also has very strong feminine qualities, which is why I used to think masculine and feminine meant male and female, and I had to learn that is not what they meant.
Yeah.
And so, which is why we have to be very conscious about communicating our needs to one another, because we have to flow between those energies with each other. Like, she's a more effective professional than 99% of the dudes that I know.
Yeah.
She is a beast.
Yeah.
And so, because she's a woman, is she supposed to not be a successful professional in the world? No.
Yeah.
And I also know a lot of dudes. I have a lot of male friends that are basically stay-at-home dads, and they struggle with admitting that fact.
Oh, yeah.
I have very few specific examples in my head where they struggle to admit that their wife is the breadwinner.
Mm-hmm.
Admitting that in society is really hard for them.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at their heart of hearts, like they're an amazing at-home father.
Right.
They're an amazing at-home father, and they're contributing in that energy. And there's technically nothing wrong with that. But the conflict arises when they don't give their wife the acknowledgement that she deserves, that she's the breadwinner. And when they try to take credit for also being a breadwinner when they're not, it creates resentment in their wives.
You just have to be honest about it.
You got to be super honest about it. And so,
and you need to be honest that if it's not okay, then something needs to be done about it.
if it's not okay, something has to be done.
If it's not okay. That's where you have to be honest with yourself.
So for us, the way that happened was, even though Heather is an award-winning entrepreneur, she's been in Forbes, she's won Austin's 40 under 40, the feminine part of her is like, you need to fill my gas, sir. My dad taught me that I don't get out of the car. You're going to fill the gas for me. I'm going to earn this money, but you're going to pay the bills. And initially, I had a lot of resistance to it. I'm like, what do you mean? I thought we were like equal partners. What is this supposed to mean? And we had to like figure that out over time. And now I just take pride in the fact that what people may have an issue with this or not, but it works for our relationship. My money is our money, and her money is her money.
Of course. That's kind of how it is with me and Casey. It's a slightly different percentage, but most of the time, that's what we're generally working towards a little bit more. Things are a little tighter right now, just with what we're both trying to set a new foundation for. But yeah, and I had to struggle with that too in the early days. I'm like, I've literally said that exact statement to her. I'm like, why is my money my money, or our money, but your money is your money?
Yeah.
But now I'm like, I want it to be that way. And I think
Me too.
That comes with an understanding of our own being, of our own masculinity, of our own feminine qualities as well, finding that balance. I think there's definitely, you have to understand that there is a balance that needs to be achieved in your own masculine and feminine qualities and energies. And then there's that relationship balance that needs to occur. But do you think there is an actual work-life balance? What are your thoughts on that?
Work-life balance depends on your objectives, the season that you're in, and the time horizon that you're thinking about. So if my objective is to become financially free as quickly as possible. Like, I do not want to have to worry about money for a day longer than I have to in this life, because I want to frolic in the woods. I do.
Yeah.
I want to go and sit on a mountaintop. I want to gaze at the stars, and I do not want to be worried about money. And I want to be able to be completely immersed in that. And I know that that's possible, but you have to make quite a bit of money in order to do that. Caveat, depending on the lifestyle that you want. And we like to have a bougie lifestyle. So I have certain very explicit financial targets. Okay, that's my objective. I have a certain time horizon for achieving that. And when I look at the season that I'm in order to achieve that objective, in my days, I am working from the moment I wake up until the moment I go to sleep, with very brief periods in between where I'm working out or grabbing a moment with my wife. And we have very intentional practices to stay connected, knowing fully well that we are in the season of balls to the wall. But if I expand out in my life, there will be balance. Like, I'm going to hyperextend on work in this season, but there's going to be other seasons where I'm like, I'm not thinking about this at all.
Right.
But I'm trying to earn that right. Other people are okay with being balanced within every day. Like, okay, like I work 9 to 5, but then, 5 to 10 or 5 to 11 is my time and I'm not going to worry about work at all. I don't have that privilege because I've chosen work that requires me to be all in all the time, but the rewards match that level of commitment.
Right.
There's also an associated level of risk, which is why it requires me to be all in all the time. So
You're also at a great
balance,
point. You're also at a great point in your life where you have probably the least amount of responsibility outside of your relationship. Am I assuming?
I don't have
correctly?
kids.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You're also not running a business anymore, which is.
Well,
I guess you're at a different stage of your the level of responsibility that you have for your business.
It is slightly different.
Yeah.
Because I'm not the founder anymore.
Yeah.
It just so happens that as the COO, everything it falls on my plate in terms of day-to-day execution, but I don't have to go to sleep at night with the same anxiety that the founder has.
Yeah.
So that's true.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to lie, that's a little bit nice. It's a little bit nice. But honestly, I just don't even think that way, though. I don't have the desire to work on a thing where I don't feel like it's my responsibility.
Right. Well, you got more skin in the game. You're going to work harder.
I want to have all my skin in the game because that's the only way to earn equity.
Okay, pause. You're going to have to prompt me or ask questions.
Yeah, sorry. I'm just fucking going in on you.
That's all right. It's fine. But it's like, because I'll sit here and just want to be more curious about you. Not to say that you don't have great sound bites, but if we want to get a little of me talking in.
Hell yeah, I want to get you talking. What are your masculine qualities and what are your feminine qualities? Like your most pronounced ones?
Well, the one that I am working on currently the most is I tend to fall out of balance on the feminine side with my emotions. I can be a little too emotional, specifically with Casey. Just when we're talking about things, kids or stuff we're working on or critiques that she may bring up, I'm not always the most receptive to.
What is she critiquing?
But I will. There is a caveat with that also she knows she's becoming better at. I can tell when she's saying the right thing because she knows how to say it because she is a psychotherapist. But I can tell the energy behind it is something a little more critical of me. Now I can definitely be wrong at times. There's definitely an allusion to that I can be looking at it with a dirty lens, but I can pick up on where her energy is at behind what she's saying. And that's when I tend to be a little more defensive or emotional about the conversation that we have to have, which is something I need to get better at regardless.
How do you know it's her intention versus that's what you're taking, that's what you're interpreting?
I mean, we'll usually talk about it after the fact. If we get into a little tiff, and I call it a tiff because it's not even like a big fight. It usually is like so fast. And then we'll get out of it and I'll be like, look, I get that you came at me with the proper terminology of how you need to approach that subject, but I knew your energy behind it was different. And that's just a feeling. That's also just something we've been together 10 years now. We've done a lot of spiritual work together. Like I can tell, you know.
Is the terminology, is that masculine?
Not necessarily. The terminology is just, I don't think it's necessarily qualified as either masculine or feminine. I think it's just more, what's the best way to communicate this? And she's very good at it because she knows the textbook way to communicate everything. But again, if I know or feel your energy behind those words is different than what you're meaning, then I'm going to take issue with it a little bit.
Is that passive aggressive?
On her part? Not necessarily. No. I think she's being very conscious of how she wants to broach the subject. but also she's not sitting in her. This is where what maybe frustrates me a little bit is she wants to say that she needs me to be more in my masculine when I'm holding her emotions and holding space for her to share her emotions. But what I need from her is then to be authentic and honest about those emotions from the start. Like, if you come to me and tell me, I'm feeling this, this, and this because of this that you did, that's going to be a lot different than I'm coming to you with the proper way to tell you how your actions affected me and why what you're doing is bothering me, but you're not really sitting in your own emotions or feelings and telling me this made me sad or this made me upset. So it's a fine line because, like, obviously I know no matter how she comes at me, yes, I did something that affected you, that I wasn't there to hold space for you or hold space for your emotions. But where she needs to be more in her feminine is that she needs to be able to express those emotions to me. Like, I don't get to see them that often. And so the other day, even when she like finally kind of broke down in the car and cried, it was a much different me that was there to support her because I'm like, oh, finally, authentic emotions, crying, sadness about this situation. She wants to be so strong and present that. And I get it, why, from her childhood and her family and taking care of herself. But I can't be there to pick you up or to hold you or to carry you or to hold space for your emotions if you never actually authentically share them with me in the moments where you're feeling them.
And is that as simple as saying that made me feel fill in the blank?
Yeah, like the other day, we had sort of a tougher blow up about it a couple weeks ago. But then most recently, we were on a call. I was here at work. Sometimes I get frustrated with interrupting my work because if I'm in a flow, I'm like, hey, I need these hours. These are my hours to work. And I need to recognize we have a family. We have things going on. It's not going to always be that way. If she needs to call me at a certain point or she needs to check in on something, then that's just how it's going to be. Like, we can circle back around to my own work-life balance, but really it doesn't exist. It's work-life balance to me is an illusion. It's not to say that it can't be done by other people and everybody has their own definition of balance and what that feels like to them. But to us, or to me, it's a little different, and I can explain more of that. But she called, and I kind of was short with her and then got off the phone real fast. I was like, hey, I just need to get back to work. And got off the phone. And then she texted me. She's like, hey, I didn't feel very supported in that conversation. I was like, called her back. Kind of, again, wanted to just state my side of it. And then she was like, I just didn't feel supported. And then got off the phone, got home later that night. And I'm just like, I recognize it. I'm like, you're right. I can give you 5 or 10 minutes on the phone. Big deal. Like, why am I not there to support whatever it is that's going on in your day, even the little things? What, just because I have to get work done or because I need to get caught up on things here? Is that my own illusion that these things have to get done by 5 p.m. or 4 p.m.? That's where my quote unquote balance comes in, of kind of like what you were talking about with what are the priorities of the day. I've become better at now saying, okay, this is actually the only thing that really needs to get done by the end of the day. All the other things, it doesn't really matter.
I think what you just said about being available for that 5 minutes on a phone call or 10 minutes, I think that's part of the balance equation for me. If I recognize that, we'll just use Heather as an example, like genuinely needs my presence or attention for 10 minutes, there's pretty much nothing that I'm working on that would be more important than actually giving her that. And so I don't know that balance has to be quantitative. It can be qualitative as well.
Yes.
Right? Like, I may spend whatever hours working on stuff, but having a clear sense of priorities helps me stay balanced. And so if I get to spend a really high quality 10 or 15 minutes with her, that fills both of our cups up in a huge way, where then we don't have to then spend 4 hours with each other. You know what I mean?
We had to work through that a little bit too, because we're lucky that we get to work in the same space. And I recognized the other day, we finally had a night where we took the kids over to the grandparents, and we could actually like lay on the couch and just do nothing and watch a movie together. And that connection, while I agree with you that, yeah, getting 5 or 10 minutes here or there, especially because we get it here, having that 2.5 hours or 3 hours to watch a movie together was, and granted, we were just watching a movie. It wasn't like this, we needed these long conversations, because luckily we get to have those long conversations here at work when we want to, or in the morning before our kids wake up. But it did make me recognize that we were possibly lying to ourselves a little bit, that the 5 or 10 minutes that we often get here was enough connection, and it wasn't. That was just in our relationship. I'm not saying that's for everybody. If you can get a solid 10 with Heather and you're like, sweet, that really reconnected us back up, great. But I was just recognizing in ours, it wasn't enough for me here. And I needed to be able to acknowledge that. Like, that's something I'm still trying to get better at, is actually being able to express what I need in this relationship. I think both of us are still working on that, of what we actually need, because it's with kids, it's evolving every single day what we need. Yes, there's the overarching theme of we need support, we need love, affection, or certain things. But then on a day-to-day basis, like, I tend to need more thank yous just in the moment of oh, cool, Logan accomplished this thing, like painting the kids' game room. Yes, of course, that's my duty, and I'm happy to do it, and I had a great time and whatever. And I know ultimately Casey's very grateful for it, but in the moment, I just need a thank you, like, hey, thanks for knocking that out. And that goes along with me.
Words of affirmation are huge for me.
Yeah. And she needs more support in those moments of that phone call where she's like, hey, I always ask you more questions about what's going on with your day and let you talk about what you did in the studio. That's where I need to be better at getting curious again about what Casey's doing. I recognize that it was a lack of curiosity in what her day looks like and what she's accomplishing and what she's doing and what she wants to create. And that's just that's being a shitty partner. Like, not being curious about what's going on with her life. And not to make excuses, it's because my focus is so much on my work right now that was a moment where the work-life balance got out of balance. I think that's how I recognize if things are out of balance, is our relationship out of balance.
Totally. Are we good or are we not good?
Yeah, are we good or are we not?
It's a signal, yeah.
It's a signal. And that's really all that matters to me. Is our family good?
Yeah.
Is our family in balance? Because sometimes that, for me, might mean, oh, I have to wake up at 5 a.m. and get a workout in and then go to work at 7 a.m. Or it might be today where, shoot, I got to bed later. I was tired from the kids. I didn't wake up till 6 o'clock. I didn't get a workout in today. Now, am I going to sit there and beat myself up and say, oh my God, I'm out of work-life balance. I didn't get my workout in. I didn't do my morning routine. No, that's just what needed to occur today. And is our family still in harmony? Is this podcast session still working well? Are the things that I needed to accomplish today up to this point still happening? And like what you talk about, in a timely manner, if I'm looking at it just in chunks of time. Now, did I come in here and was I flustered and I'm like, oh, Faiez is running late? How was my mental state during all of this? And it all still felt really good. I was able to still come in here and do rituals. Maybe because I didn't get my workout, I got time to come in here and do my rituals before this podcast session. So again, is what I'm doing on a minute-to-minute, hour-to-hour, day-to-day, month-to-month basis keeping everything in life in harmony? And when it's out of harmony, that's when I know something's out of, quote unquote, out of balance.
I feel like everything just comes back to practicing self-awareness, because even though my answer to work-life balance was like, I work all the time and we get 10 to 15 intentional minutes together, that's not true on a Friday night. On a Friday night, we're very intentional about like putting everything away and being with each other. We're going on a double date with y'all this weekend. For it. On Saturday, I'm like super strict. there's no work permeating this bubble.
Mm-hmm.
But even though we have certain quote unquote routines, rituals, practices, rules in place, those things are always changing. And as long as we're communicating with each other, and when we're communicating with each other, we're listening to each other, then we're able to adapt and evolve and stay in harmony, which is a way more interesting word to me than balance.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Maybe because the culture has co-opted the word balance, and I interpret it a certain way now. But harmony.
And balance is so subjective, you know?
I feel like you can't really, maybe you can feel balance, but I just feel harmony.
What would we
better.
say balance is? Is balance 50-50?
I don't know.
If you're doing a percentage?
That's how I interpret it.
Right. So if we say you're in balance, to me, if we're talking about growing or decaying, well, balance is stagnation then at 50-50.
Right.
You're not growing or decaying, but to me, stagnation is actually dying because you're not growing. So then what is balance even? It's our own mind's interpretation or definition of creating this thing that's telling us we have to do it this way in order to stay quote unquote balanced. But then how much mental energy is that taking just to maintain that structure maybe to remain in balance?
That's interesting. Maintain the structure feels almost like a futile effort.
Yeah.
Because it's not what does maintain a structure even mean? Like prevent it from falling apart? That is like, that's not creative.
No. That seems like a lot of work.
That sounds exhausting.
Exhausting.
To prevent.
I think about like if you're creating this like scaffolding and you're having to sit there and be like,
yeah,
I got to hold this.
Yeah.
Just looking at everything.
I got to keep this the same.
Yeah.
I got to keep this
I got to keep it the
unchanging.
same, unchanged, and yet I'm not going to climb up it. I'm just going to sit here and hold it and make sure it's good.
That
to me feels like when you're trying to remain in balance.
Yeah.
But again, find whatever works for you. Everybody's different. I'm just saying in my life, I choose harmony over balance.
I like that. I'm going to think about harmony more. I feel very much in harmony. And also, when you said you're in a time in your life where you don't have a lot of responsibility because you don't own your own business anymore, I hated that so much. I responded with certain words, but if I'm self-aware, I hate that so much.
What,
Not that you said that
statement, or that you don't feel like you have the or is it that you don't own your own business? You miss it, yeah.
I miss it, and I don't. Like I told you, we started another business a couple of months ago.
Which, by the way, we're going to unpack that one day in a very big podcast therapy session.
Yeah, it's interesting. It is very interesting why that bothers me.
Yeah.
Maybe I understand and maybe I don't. I think I understand enough. But yeah, I'm just saying that out loud because I said what my financial goal is. But when you don't own your own business, it is so hard to create that financial outcome for yourself.
Is it tougher to see the steps that are going to get you there if you're not?
You're creating value for other people.
I know. It's so hard. I would imagine it's harder to do because you've done it the other way too. If you had never run your own business, it probably wouldn't.
I just know.
You wouldn't. Just know.
I know that our co-founders own, 70 and 20%. And I'm like, if you look at the hours committed in the day, if you look at the value creation of the work, there's really no difference. It's just a matter of who got in early, who risked more up front, and then the risk equation kind of balances out as more people get involved, but they incurred the majority of the risk early on. But now, like, I'm pouring my life into basically building equity for other people. I love what I get to do, and I'm happy to participate in that now, but I would be lying if I didn't think about it almost every day that I'm like, I'm building all of this wealth for other people.
Well, let's save that. Let's pin that, and we'll talk about that in another episode some more.
Yeah.
Because I could probably share a somewhat parallel story of building my first business with the personal training studios. And also just who I was at that time was very different than who I am now. Well, I think we're going to call it on this one today. This has been a fun conversation. I think it's so fun to me having these conversations with you, Faiez, because I feel like we could definitely go deeper on each of these topics. It's like we come up with a topic and then there's a subtopic and then there's a layer below it that we haven't thought about that we can go deeper with. But I just genuinely love having these conversations with you. So I hope you, the listener, the two that are out there right now, can feel that and enjoy these conversations as well. And we really do hope they bring some sort of value to you. Give it a subscribe, or what is it these days? A thumbs up or a like or something.
Like, subscribe, follow, tune into the next one. And I think my main hope is that our conversation simply spurs you to think about why you're doing the things that you're doing, and becoming, it seems the theme that we keep revisiting is the emotions that we feel as we do the things that we're doing. And if we can relate to those emotions in a certain way, it can help us make decisions that are more in line with the people that we want to be.
Yeah.
And you're a unique person. I'm a unique person. And I think ultimately we just want to help each other become aware of how we are being, so that we can take the actions that are in integrity with who we're, I don't want to say supposed to be, or
Who
meant
we've always
to
been.
be, who we've always been, who we aspire to create, so we can evolve in an authentic direction.
Yeah.
Right? I want to create a life that is authentic to me, and I want to create it. Like, I don't want to live out. It's just so cool that we get to.
It's so cool that me and you get to sit here and like have this
Yeah.
conversation even. Like, yeah.
Life, like we get to paint our own life canvas. And we just have to surround ourselves with people that take that view as well.
Yeah. And inspire those that maybe don't have that view just yet.
Take a little strength.
Yeah.
I've taken strength from tons of people
Yeah.
that painted their own lives. I'm like, oh, if they could do it, I guess I could do it too. So that's just the give and take. So
That's all we're trying to do here.
yeah,
All right, man. Love you.
love you. See you next time.